Part 2, who is Tim Taylor? Yesterday I put out part 1 the way I did for a specific reason that no one caught, and how could you have? It's not a reason you would expect. I put it out to get more information about Tim Taylor because I knew people would reach out afterwards with information on him. And that's exactly what happened. So now I give you the video I wanted to make. Let's dive in. If you're new to the channel, y'all, and you like content like this, please hit that subscribe button. We put out a new video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do not miss a day. And of course, hit that like button, y'all. That really helps out the videos. So thank y'all so much for the support there, Vetters. And of course, comment down below of what you think of this video. Let's get going. When we left off yesterday, Grant had shown a piece of metal from the supposed crash site Diana Pasulka had visited with Gary Nolan, led by Tim Taylor. See some sort of
there's a pattern
something,
on
and the other side is smooth. You're right. The other side is pretty smooth.
It's from
the crash site, right?
It's from that site.
We'll get to that later in the video. Let's lay the foundation first with some backstory. Some of the pictures and testimony you're about to hear has never been shared publicly. And there will be many parts of the story that I might miss. So if you have anything to add to this story, please put it in the comments. Who is Tim Taylor? He's referenced in Diana Pasulka's American Cosmic and Chris Bledsoe's UFO of God. But not under his real name, under a pseudonym, Tyler D. First question, how did the same pseudonym get used for both books? Was it meant to connect them? Why would Tim Taylor, aka Tyler D., allow himself to be included in both books? How did his real name come out in the first place? And why am I even making this video? And why is Tim Taylor important? I've been following Tim Taylor because I'd made some videos about Chris Bledsoe and Diana Pasulka, and his name kept popping up. I looked online, and I couldn't find one interview with him. I could barely find any information or photos of him. I had found what Jesse Michaels put in his video about Tim Taylor.
Taylor wrote an autobiography in March of 2003 called Launch Fever. Before anybody knew who Taylor was, in 2014, Townsend Brown's daughter, Linda, wrote a review of Taylor's book. She writes, an engineer's firsthand experience of what it means to be a part of the space program, a charming legacy to his daughter and all of us.
But something Jesse didn't find, or at least he didn't include in his video, is an article written about the book from 2003 from bizjournals.com that states, but there's also a fascinating detail about the Kennedy Space Center and friendships that Taylor develops. Another strong suit of his. That's interesting and something to keep in mind as we go through this video. How is someone so integral in the story of Chris Bledsoe and Diana Pasulka and even Dr. Gary Nolan, yet no one really talks about him? He's clearly connected. Let's start with what we know about Tim Taylor. Currently, he works for Vivex Biologics, and according to their website, our mission is to provide advanced regenerative product solutions that help patients suffering from musculoskeletal injuries, wounds, and burned skin. Tell me what's weird about his photo compared to everyone else. He doesn't show his face clearly. Why? And according to Chris Bledsoe and Diana Pasulka, Tim had a private area to watch the shuttle launches and was involved heavily with NASA shuttle launches. In what capacity? It's still unclear, although it said he helped plan the launches and experiments that would be performed on board the shuttles. Diana Pasulka briefly touched on this in several interviews.
One thing that was kind of funny about my friendship with Tyler was that he was part of the space program. He's really integral into the space program, and he launches, these rockets and works with SpaceX and that type of thing.
Tim Taylor holds many patents, and it's claimed by folks that know him that he got the ideas for the experiments that led to those patents from downloading information given to him by the phenomena, still undefined, but referring to extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings. I mean, let's be real. We're talking about aliens here. Jesse Michaels' video that briefly featured Tim Taylor touched on this about Townsend Brown. Same concept.
So what is Tim Taylor's connection with Townsend Brown? Was Brown the chief architect of a secret parallel space program? Townsend Brown had a UFO experience in Catalina as a teenager, is that right?
Yes, and I know the exact spot where he was standing. I used to ride my horse up that ridge. It approached him. It actually approached him.
And
he said that he learned so much standing there with that ball of light. And he said that everything that he ever learned about his work, he learned instantly.
Wow.
Everything.
Some of these experiments Tim worked on, Diana Pasulka mentions in her book and in interviews, and it features the buzzword biologics.
And now this is actually a whole field called biologics. So there's a real field now where people are doing these experiments in space and creating things that we can't create here.
Like what?
Medicine, certain types of metals.
David Grush also mentioned biologics in his testimony. And I hope it's not the same thing because according to Diana, biologics doesn't mean what you think it means. Or maybe it does. So was David Grush referring to that? Maybe not, because David Grush has used the term bodies when referring to NHI, or non-human intelligence.
We do have retrieved non-human material and craft that we have in our possession.
Do we have alien bodies?
We do.
Tim Taylor has claimed, according to Chris Bledsoe's son, that he is a part of a secret space force that is time travel technology. I'm sorry, what?
Well, the son of frequent UFO experiencer and personal friend of Tim Taylor's, Chris Bledsoe, had some interesting things to say about the topic on Twitter. He wrote that Tim Taylor personally told my father he was in an elite group called the Nassau Group, headed up by T. Townsend Brown. Also insinuated they had time travel technology.
And to add to the mystery of it all, Diana Pasulka said in a now deleted tweet, Tim Taylor was and possibly still is Elon Musk's SpaceX handler for NASA. Remember this pic? Follow the dragon emblem. That's interesting because this is what Elon Musk says about aliens.
If anyone would know about aliens on Earth, it would probably be me.
I would think.
What the f*** is going on? According to Chris Bledsoe, Tim Taylor has been studying his family for years because, as Chris Bledsoe's friend Grant Cameron puts it, Tim Taylor says the phenomena talks to Chris Bledsoe, but won't talk to them being the government, NASA. Still not sure what that means. But that also doesn't make sense because Tim Taylor has claimed he gets his ideas for experiments and the like through downloads from the phenomena. So that doesn't add up in my opinion. I thought they couldn't connect to the phenomena. How are they getting these downloads?
Tim Taylor goes to see Chris Bledsoe. Chris Bledsoe says, what now people would be saying about me is, well, what are you outing these people for? Why are you talking? And Chris Bledsoe said to him, well, what are you doing on my property? Like, why are you intelligence guys? And the Navy, everybody was there, military, Pentagon, CIA, everybody, and his kids were getting, his one kid left school, ran away from home. Kids were devastated by what was going on, all the attention, because they were in this Bible Belt police and they got thrown out of church and it was horrible. And he said, well, You're destroying my family. What are you doing here? And then Tim Taylor says to him, well, Chris, he says, it appears that they like you, Chris. It appears that they are interacting with you. Chris, they don't talk to us. They don't like us. Therefore, we're here to find out what are they telling you.
Now, this video isn't about Chris Bledsoe's claims. But to help us better understand what Tim Taylor is talking about when he says they talk to you, let's summarize a few of them. According to Chris Bledsoe, he is able to summon orbs and communicate directly with parts of the phenomena, such as the lady. He's claimed to have flown a UFO with his mind. He also claims to have healing powers, like Jesus. I think you get the point. Now, I'm not here to vet those claims or judge Chris Bledsoe. Him and his family seem very sweet and respectful. It's just to establish a baseline. It's important to note that many members of the Bledsoe family have experiences with the phenomena as well. And Chris Bledsoe is considered the most studied person by the U.S. government, meaning no other person has been studied about the phenomena by the U.S. government more than Chris Bledsoe. And there is way more to that story, but we're not going to get into that in this video. An interesting story, according to Chris Bledsoe's son, goes as such.
Dad has a dream that night that he is on Mars and he sees Bigfoot. And Bigfoot, or whatever this being is, killed itself on accident, the whole species, in a calamity. just like a nuclear cataclysm, something of that nature. They were wiped out. And in his dream, their billions or whatever number of souls left the planet in shock and trauma through this cataclysmic event. And that the guardians who took my father, remember, this is a dream, the guardians who took my father whisked the billions of souls of these Bigfoot creatures who were once advanced, fashioned them a primitive body to be sort of like a therapy for their soul so that they could be rehabilitated, brought them to Earth, placed them here, allowed them to use their interdimensional whatever abilities. Well, why we can never catch them. This is all in a dream. Just that's important to know. And that they are slowly but surely being rehabilitated from the trauma of instant cataclysm. So Dad wakes up. He's like, oh my God, that's a weird dream. He goes and tells Tyler D, and Tyler looks at him and he said, how did you know that? And Dad said, I had a dream. And he said, you are the most informed person I've ever met. And that was it.
Again, what the f*** is going on? Is Tim Taylor messing with the Bledsoes? Is that story true? Why would they lie about that story? It's confirmed that Tim was heavily involved in their life, and it was Chris Bledsoe who outed Tim Taylor to the public in the first place. And there is, again, much more to the story of Tim Taylor and the Bledsoe's family connection. Now, I've been following Diana Pasulka's story for a minute. She mentions Tyler D., Tim Taylor, in her book, American Cosmic, extensively. And most importantly, this trip they took to an alleged secret UFO crash site in New Mexico. Your first thought is probably Roswell. Mine was too. More on that in a minute. This story to the crash site, which I'm going to share, is the reason I really started to follow Tim Taylor and find out more about him, and most importantly, his intentions. Is this a psyop? Or is Tim Taylor the real deal? Let's let Diana tell her story of visiting the crash site briefly, and I'll add some of the finer details afterwards. Remember, she went with Stanford professor Dr. Gary Nolan, led by Tim Taylor.
I started in 2012.
Okay.
By 2015 and 16, I was already in full shock mode of, wow, this is bigger than I thought. And I had been invited to go to a crash retrieval spot in New Mexico that was under a no-fly zone. And I still didn't believe, though, in UFOs at this point. You have to understand that. So I just thought that I thought the person inviting me is Tyler. He's a scientist. He works for the Space Force. He believes this, and I'm wondering, how does he even believe that this is real? We're going with Gary Nolan, who's from Stanford, and he's out. But at the time, I called him James in my book. And I'm the one actually who invited him to go because I didn't really want to go by myself, you know? And so I insisted that Gary go with me, and Tyler figured out who Gary was, and he said, okay. So we went out there. We had to actually wear blindfolds, and it was out in the middle of this place in New Mexico. I don't know where. I know what was near it, but I don't know where the actual place was. And we were looking for parts, right, that had been put out there.
Now, these are facts from the crash, according to American Cosmic, Diana Pasulka's first novel about the phenomena. 1947, UFO crash in New Mexico. San Agustin, New Mexico, specifically. You can find ET parts from crashed UFOs there. Gary and Diana were blindfolded for this trip for a 40-minute car ride. The crash site area is a no-fly zone. It's named the Sacred Place. Tim compared the site to Burning Bush from the Bible. Roswell is brought up, but supposedly it isn't connected. It's one of 4 crashes in New Mexico. There may be more. The site functions as a sacred place to gather. Tim says it's one of the most significant locations in human history. Up until 2014, only a handful of people had been there. More on that in a minute. Gary Nolan and Tim Taylor were excited about going to this crash site. It was a momentous occasion, according to Diana. Tim Taylor photographed them in blindfolds. Where did those photographs go? Why is he photographing people like that? Tim Taylor believed it was advanced tech and Gary could study it and prove it's real. While Diana and Gary had to wear puffy jackets to stay warm, Tim was in a stylish jean jacket and boots and told them his body was naturally warm. Now, there are many more details about Tim Taylor, a.k.a. Tyler D, in Diana's book, American Cosmic, which I highly recommend reading, along with Chris Bledsoe's book, UFO of God. But let's focus on the crash site. A couple weeks ago, I heard this in a Twitter space.
Grant tells the story about...
She's talking about Grant Cameron, by the way.
Meeting up with Chris Bledsoe and the dog. Well, there's like a preface to that story, and it's still sort of centered around Bledsoe, but it's a bunch of them got invited to what they started calling the gathering. And it was just a few researchers and people interested in UFOs. They were all going to gather at a spot. Some of them were there to meet Bledsoe. Some of them were there to meet other people. It was just like a free-for-all. Grant was there. Tim Taylor was there. Bledsoe was there. I think Peter Robbins was there. Quite a few other people. It wasn't like a big secret thing. Well, Grant met Tim Taylor, had no idea who he was, and they just started talking. And it was Grant who told Tim Taylor where this gifting field was. He was like, yeah, I've been there. My friend Mark knows where it is, blah, 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 took it.
Again, and say it with me this time, betters. What the is going on? Enter Mark Olsen. I emailed Mark with the help of Nicole and asked for an interview. He declined, but he agreed to answer some questions through email he said I could make public. Here they are. Did Tim Taylor, a.k.a. Tyler D., learn of the UFO crash site in San Augustine, New Mexico from you or someone you know? And is it a crash site connected to the ET crafts that crashed at Roswell? Mark, I don't know how Tim found out about the San Augustine crash site. What's this Tyler D tag about? What? So Mark is claiming to not know about Tyler D? Mark is good friends with Chris Bledsoe. That doesn't make any sense at all. Tim Taylor told Diana Pasulka he had been in charge of the UFO crash site in San Augustine, New Mexico for decades, and that it had been passed down to him to maintain. Do you know if that's true? And if the crash site he took Diana Pasulka and Dr. Gary Nolan is the same one you went to? Mark, I don't know. And Tim never mentioned anything like that to me. I have no idea if he took Diana Pasulka or Gary Nolan to the same crash site I went to. Interesting. What questions come to mind when you hear that? Tell me in the comments. You've been to this crash site. Do you think it's an actual ET crash site and the parts found there are from an actual ET craft? ET referring to extraterrestrial or non-human. Mark, yes, I've been there. So right there, think about it. My first question asked if it was the same site that they went to. And then I just said, you've been to the crash site, referring to the same one. And he says, yes, I've been there. So he kind of contradicts himself, right? He says he is agreeing that it is the same. I don't know. Maybe he was confused by the question, but I designed the questions that way. Mark, yes, I've been there. Yes, I do believe it is a UFO crash site. There was a book written about our visit there and the site. It's called Finding the UFO Crash at San Augustine, written by Art Campbell. I have nothing to do with the book. I'm skeptical that the small ultralight I-beam that was found in the desert had been there for 65 years without being discovered, but who's to say? So according to the book, they found this I-beam. Please go check out this book. Let me know what you think. However, we found plenty of pieces of the craft that week that I watched being dug up. There's plenty of science from the material investigation indicating some of the materials found there were created in a zero-gravity environment. I noted that the materials were excessively light, like nothing in your hand. Tim Taylor has been doing experiments in zero-gravity environments, hence the space shuttle launches. So that's interesting. I think Gerald Anderson, he, his dad, uncle, and cousin had witnessed the crash site on the ground in 1947 and was our guide on our visit in May of 2012 at the plains of San Augustine is the one to focus on. He certainly wasn't enthusiastic to be there and excited to share his stories with us on site. And at night, after the dig and dinner, under the stars every night. Interestingly, we passed the array of satellite dishes that were used in the movie Contact every day we drove to and from the crash site. I recall standing there, the actual crash site, with Tim Taylor and Gerald. Tim recorded this with his camera. Gerald was standing there pointing out a spot on the ground saying, there were 2 dead aliens on the ground here. Another live one standing over there. The craft was embedded in the side of a wash on an angle, right where the rock outcropping was. That rock outcropping looks completely unusually and out of place, considering there was 30 miles of rolling sand, gravelly desert without any outcroppings anywhere else to be seen. Gerald made a comment that I'll never forget when he said, cold air was pouring out of the craft. June is an excessively hot time there. He was describing the craft had been ripped open and embedded in the ground where we were standing. It seemed like an odd recalling to be saying in 2012 about something that happened in 1947 in the middle of the desert. Seemed very authentic. Tim was right beside Gerald. And when he said that, I said something while we were standing there that Tim recorded. Something to the effect of, this could have been the first time that humanity had been face to face with ETs. At that time, it was a surreal moment listening to Gerald talk about him standing there with his father, cousin, and uncle, all side by side, 65 years ago, about such a significant occurrence in our history. Then Gerald explained the military moved in and took them all away, all in separate vehicles, to White Sands, New Mexico. He had his life and his family lives threatened at 6 years old by authorities if he said anything. He swore that he would never talk about it until 1991 when he watched someone on television talking about the event. And the last question I asked Mark, and maybe the most important in my opinion, do you believe Tim Taylor is genuine? Mark, yes. The Tim Taylor I met there in San Augustine in 2012 is genuine. I also think Tim is a senior person with authority at NASA. Do you believe Tim Taylor believes in the UFO phenomenon? Mark, yes, but probably more like he knows the UFO phenomenon is real. Do you think Tim is running a psyop personally or by orders of his superiors? Mark, no idea on those points. It's possible, as that isn't an unusual concept when discussing UFO and ETs. But in my opinion, this crash is a real UFO crash site. Tim and Gerald are real and authentic. I was very fortunate to have been invited to that dig. Now, I was able to speak to Grant Cameron and Nicole and ask more questions about Tim Taylor. Here's some interesting comments from that conversation.
When I met Tim Taylor, number one, there was no secret thing. It was like, do not mention my name, nothing. It was just this guy. We had this discussion, very interesting discussion, whatever. I didn't even really know who he was at the time. And the importance of what he showed me, I didn't realize for years after that.
That's what Tim does too, right? Hasn't he filed a lot of patents from?
He's got 40 patents, yeah, and he claims they're all come
from the phenomena, right?
And that's why I talked to him. That was what the big discussion I had with him.
But if he's telling Chris Bledsoe, hey, they don't talk to us, they talk to you, we want to find out why, then how is he able to download this information through protocols?
He's talking to them, but it's about medical stuff. Yeah, all his inventions are medical things, which I talked to him about.
So the phenomena will talk to him, but only about medical stuff? That seems odd.
Yeah, well, I mean, he has the inside. He has this thing about the pieces of metal and stuff where he puts the metals in Chris's hand.
I don't know if I buy that, to be honest. Just being honest, I don't buy that. Why would the phenomena only talk to him about medical stuff, and then the Bledsoes, the phenomena would talk about,
they know other stuff, but in terms of, like, they don't talk to me about medical stuff. They don't. I get downloads, but they don't. There's certain things that I'm sort of being given. But
sure.
Not
oh
everything.
Man, gosh, we definitely got to have another interview, Grant. I got
and
so
that's
many
why
questions
you follow
for you.
These guys. So if you find out somebody's got some sort of contact, or that he's working in this lab, or that he's following Chris Bledsoe, and when I talked to Chris Bledsoe and I interviewed him, I said, so what did Tim say about this? What did Tim say about that? Because I'm trying to find out.
Now let's get to this piece of metamaterial of the supposed UFO Grant Cameron has in his possession. Again, He says it's from the same crash site Diana Pasulka went to.
I've got 3 pieces of metal that were given to me, and whether they're pieces of metal or whatever, I just think that's kind of a trap
Grant,
where you
when
think
you
that.
put it in perspective, though, of you take a hacksaw and cut this piece off, and you have people like Tom DeLonge paying 35 grand for a piece that Linda has that she keeps in this secure vault building.
Oh, wow. There we go. Bam. Oh, look, there you go. There you go. Oh, wow. So you cut that, you're saying yourself.
Yeah.
Boom.
And
you
it has
cut
a
that.
pattern on the one side. I don't know if you can see it. There's a pattern.
Yeah, I could see some sort of
there's a pattern on the one
something.
side.
And the other side is smooth. You're right. The other side is pretty smooth.
So that was a piece. There was about 3 different pieces.
So real quick, just to be clear, that is allegedly a piece from a not crashed UFO. Well, yeah, it's a crash site, so it's supposed to be
it's from
the crash site, right?
It's from that site, the site. And this guy had a booth at UFO Congress. It wasn't an open. He had an open. He was showing pieces that he had recovered there, and he had a booth and stuff like that. And then they were going on a dig. Like people go for sky watches. This guy went on a dig, and Mark and Tim Taylor went on this dig, and he thought, oh, this is pretty cool. And my impression was that Mark says he doesn't remember that, but my impression was that Tim said, hey, this is a real deal. He was really excited after he saw some of these pieces. It wasn't like he went out there and it's like, oh, this is just garbage. You guys are missing the boat or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
Mark said Mark said Tim filmed Gerald telling the story and everything there, like at the site.
Yeah. And I've got a picture of Tim Taylor with Anderson at the site from Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't know.
That's what happened. Tim went there.
If there's any way for me to get that picture, that would be awesome. If not, I mean, again, no pressure. I'm not trying to, I don't know if that's something you're trying to make public.
I've got a book coming out. I'm going to put the Tim Taylor picture in the book. I'm trying to get Mark to give me a good.
When's
that
book?
When's
that book coming out?
I got 2.
I'm editing it.
Yeah,
like this year. It'll come out this year.
Well, it's ready. It's just we're waiting for an edit from Nicole. Then it's 2 books. It's Beyond Managing Magic, and then Beyond Managing Magic, Landing the Plane, and then Nicole and I got into another one, which is going to be another book. They're about to drop a whole mess of stuff, and Nicole's involved.
I'll work on the title for that one. The working title.
But man, I got to see this picture.
Massive...
For me, the truth about this story is the mystery of this crash site. Let's discuss the discrepancies in the story and the crash site itself. Is it the same crash site? Does Tim know about multiple crash sites? How did Tim learn of all these crash sites? Is it part of Roswell? There was a book written about Mark Olsen's trip to the same crash site that Diana Pasulka went to. Yeah, that happened, remember? But according to Mark, he's not sure if it's the same crash site, but then says he went to that crash site, the same one. So remember, Gary Nolan has even denied part of Diana Pasulka's secret UFO crash site story. I made a video if you want to check out the full story, link in the description. But basically, Dr. Nolan specifically denied the part about the frog skin material that they allegedly dug up at the crash site, that when crumbled, reformed on its own. Yep, just like the material allegedly recovered from Roswell. But that material was always described as foil. And even more peculiar is the description in the book is different. And Diana Pasulka explains why that is, and even goes on to explain a different description of the same material.
What did the piece that you guys found look like? You kind of briefly mentioned it in the book, but it wasn't a really lengthy description.
So there were certain things that I was, I had to abide by the rules. By, when I write about a person, I send that to them and I say, edit this for you. I want them to be happy. And if there's something there that they don't want me to talk about, they'll take it out. And so my description of the parts were edited and taken out. And I believe this was for security reasons. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Because it was at the, right now for my next book, I'll be speaking with a lawyer this week about it. And it's not because of me, it's the press. It's like, this subject is scary. We need to make sure that everything we do is legal and on the up and up. And believe me, I'm very grateful for that. So at the time though, I just thought, I'm just doing research here, And so some of the parts looked like I know it sounds kind of weird, but I will tell you, you asked. So they looked like reptile skin that was metallic. Like, you know how you could come upon a snake and it shed its skin, and what that looks like, scaly and everything? Some of it looked like that, but it was metallic. And some of it just looked like it was this strange material that looked a little bit like bubble gum that was hardened. And throughout the whole bubble gum, it had like thread that was so thin, it was thinner than your hair. And it was threaded throughout. And Gary said that, you'd look at it and you'd see it throughout the whole thing. He said that was just one piece of this thread, that it wasn't many threads. It was like one piece running throughout. So it looked pretty strange.
Was it corroded at all?
No, nothing was corroded.
How big were these pieces?
So these pieces that I found weren't very big. I mean, they were one of them was about like this big, right?
Okay, like so the size of a pack of gum?
Yeah. And the actual frog skin type thing was probably about this big.
Like a small notebook?
And we found a couple of those.
Mm-hmm. You found a couple of those just wandering around this area?
Well, we weren't wandering. We were actually digging in and looking. And yeah.
Wandering's a bad word.
That's
but
okay.
Exploring.
Yeah.
This frog skin, what is it? Is it malleable? Is it?
Yes, it's malleable. And you could crunch it up and it'll go back to its original form.
I've heard of that before. That was something that they talked about at Roswell. That there was some bizarre metal that you could crumple up like a piece of paper and it would flatten right back out.
What kind of frog skin? There are over 6,000 species of frogs. And Diana mentions a lizard skin, like a snake skin. So which is it? These are much different things. So why do Noah's stories seem to line up when it comes to Tim Taylor? I actually believe Grant when he tells me what he knows about Tim. And Grant has way more stories to tell about Tim Taylor. Example. Grant,
because then we got to get into the story about Tim Taylor telling me about the jump room at LAX. That's
dude. Yes. Okay. We are definitely going to do another one here. I'll send out another. As I dig into this story more, the more confused I am. The story of Tim Taylor intrigues me. I'd love to hear from Tim Taylor, and I think the rest of the world would too. Why do I think I can talk about him? Well, American taxpayer money has been spent on this. So that makes it fair game to me. What are my tax dollars being spent on? Is Tim Taylor his real name? Why do all of his names originate from made-up TV and movie characters? Is it a coincidence? Maybe. But if there's one thing I've learned in ufology, there are hardly any coincidences. Plus, Tim Taylor, a.k.a. Tyler D., might have knowledge that could change the way we view this world. Or it's all bullshit.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross